Hey, legends, and welcome back. We got a chance to sit down with Nicole Wingard, better known maybe as Nicole the Intern, to hear about her journey smashing cans to breaking. She was a viral sensation, and hearing all about her perspective of what it takes to win in the marketing world today.
And what brands should be doing to embrace creativity amidst the chaos of online culture. Really interesting conversation with Nicole today.
So good. We'll talk about imposter syndrome,
The creative process, barfing up on Google Docs.
I loved it.
Everything.
So much to learn. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Thanks for being here, Nicole. Really excited to chat with you. I was watching from afar this, I'm so excited to just get into your brain and hear like the behind the scenes and, some of the things you were thinking about and where you're at now. Maybe we could give our listeners, like those that don't know about the
Journey.
the amazing journey, but we could start from the beginning. I mean, you took this challenge on. You said in 60 days you're going to get to 500,000 followers, or you're going to agree to get fired. Paint the picture. Where did this start? Start from the beginning.
Okay. It actually all started about 8 months prior in summer. I had just quit my IT recruiting job. I was 100% set on being in sales. I was like, I love people. Sales is for me. That's my career. And I did that job for a year and I learned a lot, but I quickly realized that it just wasn't doing it for me and I needed something else. So I had lined up another opportunity. Unfortunately, it fell through last minute. And so I was stuck without a job. And so I'm frantically looking on LinkedIn, trying to find something. And I come across this woman named Christina Roth, who's the founder of Mixology. And I look her up, realize that she's incredible, featured in Forbes, built this previous company, consulting company. And then her new venture was this non-alcoholic cocktail brand. And that was simultaneously very exciting to me because I had just committed to doing a personal year of no drinking. So I was, exploring the NA world myself. And I thought how cool to work and learn at a startup that also I believe in the mission. So it turns out too, I had a connection. Actually, my fiance, boyfriend at the time, knew her, had worked for her consulting company and connected me with her. I asked for a job. She said no. And I said, okay, I'll check back in a week. And then a week went by. I asked her for a job again. She said no. And not in a mean way, just in a way, it was a startup. They didn't really have the resources to train me. She didn't really know where I could fit in. But I was very persistent because I said, I want to learn from you and I'll do anything. I think the third time I asked her, I said, I'll be your intern. I'll work for free. I just want to learn. You don't even have to pay me.
You don't turn that down.
Yeah, she didn't. She did end up paying me. I think it was $15 an hour.
Yeah.
Was what I was learning. And coming from, corporate job, at the IT recruiting, that was definitely a pay cut.
Yeah.
But I got thrown into the mix of it. I didn't do solely content to start. I learned a lot of aspects of the business and dipped my toes into the TikTok world. Didn't know anything about it, but just started making content. And then flash forward to November, December, she hired a guy, Mike Chambers, boss Mike, on to be our CMO. And how the Smashing Cans came about was we had this real business problem where we had thousands of cans about to expire. And Mike and I, because then I was assigned to be his minion. So then we took me from doing all the other business things. And Christina said, no, let's just focus on marketing. Let's have you do marketing. So I'm learning from him and we're brainstorming. And he said, okay, Nicole, we can't just throw all these cans away. We should do something with them. So we brainstormed for 2 months, lot of bad ideas were thrown out there. And how the actual idea came about is Mike and I were at our wits' end, pretty much. We were like, we're making this too hard. And he said, just go outside and hit the can. Just go outside and hit it. Get a bat, hit the can. And I did. And then came up with the overlay. And he asked me to come up with a handle name. And I was like, well, let's just call it the best marketing strategy ever. And then he was the one who came up with the fired thing. And I was like, wow, that's kind of bold, but nobody's going to see it. So whatever, like, it's probably not going to work. And then you know the story from there. But that's how it came about.
So good, Boss Mike.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it didn't hit right away, right?
Mm.
So take us into those few days, and like it was 60 days and the goal was best marketing strategy ever. You got to get to 500,000 or you're going to lose your job. So the first couple days after you went and hit the can and nothing really happened, how did you show up and do day 2? And then what happened?
Okay, wait, let me think of the days. It was day 3. It exploded. I do remember because I made a little noise that, and I don't know if it was that noise, but it was pretty funny. And there were a lot of comments about it. But that was the one that took off. So, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of time between day 1 and day 3 for me to really ruminate on it and I also too, I very much so was a student of the game. Mike was, because I mean, Mike has a very impressive track record, and he was like, let's try this. And I said, great. You know, just the mentality that he had was to approach socials. You know, you just throw things at the wall and see if they stick. And he was like, we could very well fail, and that's fine, but let's just try. So it didn't really bother me. I was like, I'll hit some cans for sure. And the next day I got a different instrument. The first day was a bat. The second day, it might've been a brick or something. And then that's kind of when I think the seed was planted in my mind. And I was like, oh, for this to work, it needs to get a little bit better every day. Even though there hadn't been a lot of traction. Like I couldn't just do the same thing every day, I realized.
That's I think the thing that I'm still back on is like you said, we brainstormed for 2 months. There was a lot of bad ideas that we didn't do. And I don't mean that, I don't mean this in like a judgmental way, but genuinely, like how do you even filter what's a good idea versus a bad idea when the good idea ended up being smashing cans on TikTok? Like, and I don't mean that judgmental. It's just like, it seems to me almost a mystery sometimes between what's a good idea and what's a bad idea in the social sphere.
Oh, for example, some of them weren't feasible. Like one of my ideas was that we would smash a can for every follower that we got. But then very quickly, we would have no more cans to smash because the expired cans, there weren't even that many. I mean, there were a lot. You know, I think about maybe 1,200. But getting 1,200 followers, then what do we do from there? Right. So that's kind of what I mean from bad idea. More that it wasn't sustainable, or it just wasn't the right fit. Like we needed something that made sense to smash this number of cans and then also help us grow our social presence. That's what I mean. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I know.
So tell us a little bit about the viral moment. So when did it really start to pick up, and what were you hearing from the community that of people that became the Smash Army? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So I do have to preface this with, at the time in my life, I was competing for the Miss Texas pageant, which was a really big competition. I'd been prepping for 5 years of my life, and this was the year that I thought it was my year. I thought I was going to win. And when we started can smashing, it was like 5 days before this super big weekend that's kind of it's kind of like the draft pick for the NFL. You know, you're watching the girls and whatever. So I was very preoccupied with that. I mean, obviously still like do my job, get it done. And then, you know, my brain was elsewhere. And so it's so funny to me. I reflect, you know, reflecting and looking back on all the craziness that happened. That third video that took off and got millions of views. I just was like, huh, okay. There was no, I don't know why it didn't click in my brain, or I just was like, yep, this is okay. This is happening. And I got to do my job every day. So how am I going to work with this? Because then it was clear that people were looking at the page. They were looking at me, what I was going to do. At this point, Mike and I had never met in person. He lived in Costa Rica. So I remember he calls me and he says, Nicole, this is huge. I don't know if you know how huge this is. I'm not there to help you. You know, I can help you come up with ideas, you know, whatever, but you have to edit and film and shoot, and you have to be the face of this thing. And I was just so in the zone with all these other things that were going on in my life. I was like, cool, okay. You know, it's just very, I think, boots on the ground mentality. So when the Smash Army just started happening and people started calling it the Smash Army, I just was like, cool, this is normal. This is what's supposed to happen. You know, it's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah. I think that there's kind of one of the ingredients for sure in not in like viral success, but in community building is that like release that you like release some of the ideas or some of the names, some of the language to the community, and like let them come up with the name, or let them suggest the next thing you do, or let them get you kind of embrace that involvement with the people who are responding and whatnot. So it's kind of neat to see how like or understand your mindset of it is very much like, okay, well, I don't know what's next. We'll do it again tomorrow. Like kind of what were there any sort of other than the name, were there any other sort of like places where your audience started to get involved in what you were doing, and anything you could, fun stories or anything like that you could share from that angle?
Oh, definitely. Most of it came from the ideas. We would put in the captions, what do you guys want to see next? And so a lot of the ideas I came up with, and Mike came up with so many of the great smashes as well too. But they came from the comment section. And there's this one story in particular that Mike and I love to tell, but the Smash Army was asking for a Pixar smash, and like the little light bulb guy.
Yeah.
And I had been thinking about it for a week, probably. I think, you know, I was in the 20s or something. And I was like, how can I make this happen? People really want this. And then I came up with the idea, and I tell Mike, and he goes, no, I don't see your vision. I don't understand how you're going to execute that, but do your thing. And if it's not good, we won't do it. But at the time there was a lot of pressure because we didn't plan this. So I was making content Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like I was coming up with the smash and then filming it that day. So there was no room for error. Like if the smash wasn't good, we had to post something that day. So honestly, I'm surprised that there was one day in particular where it was bad and it's like 5 p.m. and we had nothing. Surprised that didn't happen more. But anyways, I filmed the Pixar smash and they loved it. Sometimes if I'm ever feeling down or something and I need a little boost of confidence, I go back and watch that video because I was like, yeah, girl, you did this. This was really funny. And it was one of the best performing videos.
Oh man, I love that. What did the pressure feel like? Like, did it fuel you, or like that pressure to perform every single day and like outdo yourself every single day? How did you manage that?
Truthfully, I didn't really think too much about it.
Yeah.
Because it was very, very much so. There was this huge buying atmosphere that I had because I wasn't necessarily trying to become viral. That wasn't my intention doing this job, or I didn't want to be a face of a company or have hundreds of thousands of followers. I just wanted to do a really good job at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I was able to compartmentalize it very well, where I was like, this is my job. And who I am as a human, who my parents created me to be, is someone that works hard, someone that has excellence in everything that they do. And so it wasn't necessarily the fact that I needed to impress hundreds of thousands of people. It was just like, Mike's depending on me, Christina's depending on me, like the team is depending on me. And it's my turn, like, to show up and to do a good job. So I think that was more the mentality, as opposed to feeling the pressure of the community. With the caveat that changed towards the end, because the end of the campaign was hard for us because we didn't have a plan. And so then I did feel a bit of pressure of like, what are we going to do next? But during the campaign, I didn't feel that pressure as much.
How can you just, like, you don't have to get into super details on it, but like, what were the results? Like,
business
it's
results.
one thing to get like a lot of attention, but it's another thing to really like change the shape of the brand that you're working for. Like, it had a big impact on where things went next for the company. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how did it change things for the brand? How did it change things elsewhere in the company, this attention?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the first number that's just shocking. I think this honestly actually might be a bit low, but I increased the sales revenue by 1,200%.
Wow.
1,200%. Yes. Yeah.
Crazy.
And Christina wasn't going to hire you. What the heck?
Right.
What?
$15 an hour.
You weren't going to be hired. It's crazy. Yeah, $15 an hour.
Yeah. I think, I think it just completely changed the whole direction of the company and its future success, its present success. I mean, it was a company that wasn't on the map, that people didn't know about. And then, I don't want to just say me, because it wasn't just me, but with the team effort, this campaign completely changed its trajectory, and with the sales numbers alone. But then also the visibility from the Instagram page, the actual subscribers on our email list. Yeah, it was shocking. I think to this day, I mean, I don't know anymore since I've moved on, but that was the best sales period that they've had.
Amazing. And Gary V jumped on board. Tell us about that. What was that like?
So there's a guy named Nick Dio who reached out to us. Actually, wait. Let me back up. I got to give a shout out to my fiance, because truly he really played a big part, I think, in this whole thing. Is he's, how I got the connection with Christina. And then he is a huge Gary Vee fan. I mean, massive, major Gary guy. And one day he's listening to the podcast and he calls me, because we were doing long distance at the time. And he was like, Nicole, I think Gary Vee is talking about you in his podcast. And I said, no. And he goes, no, I think it's you. And he sends me that clip that we had posted. And it was very short. It was only 5 seconds or so, but it was me. And Nick Dio had showed him the page, told him it was going to be big. And Gary referenced me as an example of someone doing exploding idea growth on Instagram. So that's how we got connected with them. And then we just baited it. And, we called them out in front of all of our followers. And it was great. And then that's how we ultimately got the collab. And Mike and I and our videographer, we flew out to New York and we got to meet him and
so cool.
Smashed a can with him. He got so into it. It was great.
That's sweet.
Yeah, Gary doesn't like half-ass anything he does.
No,
he's like, I'm
half-ass
in.
Yeah, totally. All the shit says.
So good. I think a lot of brands are wanting to work with creators now. I mean, obviously that's where the whole industry is going. Is everything I buy, I feel like it's from a creator recommending something to me. And it's such a great example of how you took over the brand and just did this in your way. And I'm just curious for you, like, what insights do you have with brand leaders on how they can successfully work with creators and like, you know, what does it look like to hand over control and creativity, and like any suggestions on that?
I think trust is probably a huge thing, because that was the only way really that it worked. Was Mike and I, even though we barely knew each other, we just met, didn't meet in person until like day 35. There was just this unspoken trust that he knew what he was doing, because I had a lot of fears and questions and whatnot going on throughout the campaign. And same for him, on, you know, for me, that he could trust me to make this content and come up with ideas every day. Um, as I'm getting into the corporate world and seeing the corporate side of socials, I think that's one of the things that drew me to working for VaynerMedia or VaynerX, you know, that whole family of companies. I work for Gallery right now. But just their ability to execute in a timely manner, jumping on trends, trusting their creators and the people that they work with to come up with an idea and then execute it. Because sometimes, you know, sometimes it's just hard to explain what's going on in here. It's just it's like, hey, you got to trust me. Here's the best way I can describe it. But then, you know, if it's a specific idea, let me just do it and show it to you. Or, you know, if it's a really out of the box weird thing, which you see tons of brands these days doing, like Dunkin', Oreo, Sour Patch Kids, that they really leaned into trusting their creators, and that the creators know what resonates with an audience.
Yeah, the timeliness is so key, because like by the time, if you're like, oh, I need to approve this and put it into a brief and like get it up the ladder, it's like the trend's gone. The moment is gone. And so it's really about allowing the creator to meet the moment with what the moment needs, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you approach it now, like not necessarily from the viral angle necessarily, like I think some of that, as I understand, is like unpredictable and hard to reproduce. But I'm curious how you look at it now when you're thinking about creating a meme or creating a joke or doing something that's for a client. Like what are the factors that you're considering? How do you tune your own radar to better sort of integrate with culture, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Figuring that out. No, it's been so fun. You know, at this job, it's only been 2 weeks. Only been working here 2 weeks, but that was honestly what my biggest question mark, or I guess fear, in a real sense, going into the next thing I'd do after Smashed. Because I'm sure, you know, just human nature. Like there was a little voice in my head that was like, maybe it was just, you know, not a fluke, but like, a one-hit wonder. You know, like, can you recreate this or whatever? Just super neg voices. And I think the best way I've been able to combat that is learn as much as I can, because at the end of the day, it's about the client and the client's audience. So I think shifting that focus, where I was just working for one brand and I understood our audience so well and what they wanted to see. And then going to a corporate setting from that startup vibe, there's a learning curve. And so I think doing market research, looking at competitors of the brand I'm working on, going over the deck that my company gives me, but then really just like reading as much as I can, finding examples of other social media content that's done really well, has been what's worked for me the best.
I think the other thing I see is that like you talked about trends, like you jump on this trend, you're going to be quick when it's happening. What you did was it wasn't following a trend, it was its own thing. And it was like, I think it's cool to hear how it's like very, it fit the need of the moment. Like what you have, what do we have on hand? Oh, we got too many expiring cans. Like we got to do something there. So you're kind of working with the ingredients that you have. But I'm just curious to like, I don't want you to have to try to read the tea leaves or anything like that. I just am curious about, like, do you see the path as like a brand just taking a bold move and like extending their voice into the market in whatever way feels authentic or correct to them, or do you see the strategy more aligning with like what the culture is already doing, what the meme formats are that are out there, or what's the sense of humor that the audience is having? Like, how do you weigh original creativity versus, trend
Like following
surfing, I
culture
guess?
or
Yeah,
steering
following or
culture,
leading, I
leading.
guess.
Yeah.
hmm I personally think it's 50-50. Um, the campaign that we ran was special and amazing, but it was also a campaign. And where we did struggle, I mean, pure transparency, was figuring out who we were and what our sustainable content looked like after the campaign. Um, and I mean, granted, like we didn't know the campaign was going to happen, so there was really no way to plan for the future when it wasn't even our plan. But I've noticed that with looking at really successful brands and what they're doing on socials right now, they are very clearly original. Like take for example, Sour Patch Kids is just my favorite. In terms of the humor, unhinged, funny uh, content bucket. Not every brand has that same voice and tone, but what they're doing, a lot of it's a similar meme format or a similar type of humor, but they come up with their own stuff. It's not something that I've seen anywhere else. And sometimes you see content that plays on other trends, but having that original voice, I think, is really important. So I think a brand has to do both.
Yeah, it's
I want to go
interesting.
look at Sour Patch Kids
Sour
now. I'm
Patch
like, I
Kids.
don't know. I'm
Oh,
not
you'll
connected to
laugh
that
so
brand.
hard. They're hilarious.
Yeah. Is this, they've like made them, they've like personified the kid, like they're like, yeah, it's very
Yeah.
funny.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a
But
bit,
then,
it's
well,
out
I think
there. It's like a
another
little
cool
bit
thing I've been
unexpected.
learning too is that humor doesn't work with every brand.
Right.
I actually was reading a really great article from a marketing agency, and they were just talking and evaluating different successful makeup brands because that's some content I have to ideate for. And they said if humor isn't your thing, what your audience wants to see, then don't force it. So I think also using different parts of my brain and knowing how to do the creative process in a different way than what I did for the past year. That just because or to make a piece of content successful doesn't mean it has to be funny.
Right.
So that's been cool to learn as well.
Take us into that creative process a little bit. Like, how are you approaching learning about different brands and getting connected to their audience and like what will work, or exploring what will work for different types of industries and clients?
I think my rule of thumb is that no idea is a bad idea. Literally what my creative process looks like is I open a Google Doc and then I just throw up on it. Any idea that comes to my head. Walking really helps. Mike taught me that whenever he needed to come up with an idea, he would go on a walk, being outside. Um, Even if I'm like, oh, it's kind of dumb or it's stupid, you put it down anyways. And that's just the best way that I've found. And some of my best ideas have come from not judging the piece of content or the idea that you have before knowing its worth, because it could be really good.
Mhm.
It could smash.
It could
Yeah,
smash.
you never know. You never know. Yeah, it's that's that unpredictable nature of it, right? It's not like how culture responds to creativity is still just a
Makes
mystery.
no sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense at times, but I think one thing that's for sure is that culture doesn't respond to you doing nothing. And I think, there's something about just dumping those ideas out or barfing onto a Google Doc and that starts to create something. I would say that one of the things that seems to stall the sort of the creative process for any brand or any voice of a brand and market is trying to reach perfection, like trying to get the idea perfect or the campaign fully dialed before you actually step foot into the arena. And maybe the best way isn't to, or maybe it's not the most comfortable way to like just launch a campaign without actually knowing what do we like, what's the plan or how long is this going to go for or anything like that. But maybe just what would be your advice in terms of like killing that negative voice or silencing the nag and like getting to moving beyond just the idea to actually getting something into market?
Mm-hmm. I think it comes down to being willing to get outside of your comfort zone. That's the piece of advice I would give. I come from pretty girl, curated feed aesthetic Instagram. That's what I grew up on. I also have a pageant background too, and social media and learning how to build a brand for yourself was a huge part of it. And looking perfectly curated and always put together was very much also the energy. So I read a really interesting article that talked about how that there was a phase where Instagram had that tone and it was this curated vibe, but that has shifted and changed. And I was thrown into that shift and change, and all of a sudden I'm acting like a complete dork. I'm painting myself green and being the Hulk. And I mean, I know it's a personal example compared to giving advice to a brand, but friends and family were seeing that. And I think, this image I created of myself as Nicole, very put together, stylish, poised. It was none of that, but people loved it.
Yeah.
And they just loved authentic Nicole doing silly things, acting out different characters. And so if a brand is willing to go outside of their comfort zone, I think they will be shocked how successful it can work for them, because probably the biggest thing I learned from the whole campaign is that people love authenticity. And they just love funny, real content.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I want to feel the human, not like fitting ourselves into boxes. Such a good reminder. Like, and on the personal brand front, I know so many people can get paralyzed with the creation for friends and family. It's like, oh I'm like, just block them. Like literally just block them. You're not creating for your friends and family. To get over that is so powerful. So,
but it's also the same thing. Like, I feel like I always use banks as an example of this. Like, banks are always like trying to be like so proper and trustworthy and consistent, and like everything comes down to like brand standards and all that kind of stuff. And I think when you try to do that in like, especially personal brands, like this is my aesthetic, and it's always like what you're actually doing is like dehumanizing the one advantage that you have, which is the fact that you actually are a human. Like,
totally.
The people, we do our best to like put these walls up and like, or wallpaper or whatever, but it's like at the end of the day, I know you're just a human being. What I actually want is a connection, not another idol to follow or something like that, I guess.
Totally. Well, it's one of the cult brand principles, right? Be relatable.
Be relatable. Yeah. It's relatable to someone to paint yourself green and Hulk smash a can. Like somebody in that subset is like a fan of that, and that's the thing. They're going to share it. They're going to like repost it, whatever, make it amplify the message in some way.
Well, I think that's so much why people followed your journey and loved it so much, is like, you were rooting for you.
Oh, totally.
Like for you. And the storyline of that, of like, let's stick it to Boss Mike. Like, I am going to smash these cans and I will win and I will get to 500,000. It was like, tell your friends, follow this girl, follow this journey, because that was the human spirit of like, she can do this. Like,
yeah, totally. Everyone loves an underdog.
Oh, love an underdog
subplot. Yeah.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that was the biggest aspect of the campaign I struggled with. Like, weighed on me throughout the campaign. It was very, very difficult.
What part of it?
The part where we talked about me getting fired
Yeah.
because that was never going to be the plan. I would get fired from being an intern and then get promoted, was what we had talked about at the beginning. But it wasn't this malicious relationship between Mike and I. We were playing characters.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also with a grain of salt too, I didn't know anything about marketing. I honestly wasn't even that active on my own social media besides posting required stuff I had to for pageant things, and so I'm being thrown into this world where storytelling is a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And um I tend to be a bit of a rule follower. It's just who I am. If there's a sign that says keep off the grass, like you got to know I'm not going to be walking on the grass. And so I was like, "Oh my gosh, that thousands of people follow me and they think I'm a hero. They think I'm a savior and I'm just doing my job. I don't hate my boss and he doesn't hate me." Um and amidst the whole thing, Mike was like, this is a marketing campaign. People know it's not real, but
Right.
there was a very real fear in me that at the end of the campaign and the curtain were lifted, that people would hate me because I was playing this character. So in hindsight, I wish I hadn't fixated on that so much because nothing bad happened at the end, and it turns out the majority of people did know that it was a bit, basically.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then they call into question, is she really an intern? This whole thing's fake. And so it was just hard because it was very nuanced. Like there were elements of it that were very real. And it was just me being an intern, which I really was, making videos in my backyard. But the drawing out the characters, it was definitely fictitious. So that was hard for me to deal with.
Yeah, I don't know. There, it's a bit, but it's also so relatable. Like I feel like
So good.
I don't know, especially in that content sphere. Like my boss doesn't get this. It's just I would say probably something that the generation that was attracted to the
Yeah.
content really
Yeah.
does resonate with them.
Totally.
Like hey, this is actually where culture's happening right now. This is actually how people are communicating. This is actually what makes sense for brands now. Feels like maybe maybe you helped kind of like break through some of that for other interns.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, like you're not the only one that has been trying to, I guess, illuminate a different path to relevance for businesses these days. The world is changing and has
Mm-hmm.
changed, and there is still a subset of marketers and decision makers who are like, let's run an ad campaign.
Right.
Let's do it with a BOGO. Like try to find the old tricks that used to work that aren't as relevant now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's obviously what's unlocked these other opportunities for you. I mean, what a cool campaign to be a part of. And now you're
Cool
working
journey.
at VaynerX. Like, that's badass. It's amazing.
Yeah, nice.
It is. No, it's so cool, and I'm so thankful, and if anything, I wish I could have just lived in the moment more and realized how incredible what was happening was happening. That fall, I went on a tour of sorts, and I basically activated the Smash Army and had them come out and visit me at Sprouts, and I think during that time was probably my favorite of the whole campaign because real people. One guy drove an hour to a Sprouts to talk to me for 10 minutes. And just to hear their stories and hear why they loved the campaign, what resonated with them, and they gave me advice. It was just such a sweet moment, and I think it was then I was like, "Wow, if a brand is able to do this and create this real relationship between their consumers, I mean, your consumers will buy anything. Like they'll be your most loyal fans. So being able to unlock that for a brand, I mean, that's just huge.
I love
Super
it.
cool.
Nicole, we're so pumped to have you out to the gathering this year as a speaker. One of our themes this year, or our theme this year, is winning the future together. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts around what it takes to win in the social media world and the marketing world in 2025?
You have to be a student of the game. it's just constantly changing, the ban and then not the ban and then the ban again and then not the ban, and the algorithms changing. And I mean, it can be a scary landscape out there. And I have realized in my 2 weeks of working, no, I'm just kidding. But even before I came to Gallery, I have to be willing to do things different. I have to be willing to learn new information, apply it, adapt, change, which can be really hard for people and myself too. You do one thing and you know it works. I think social media requires you to change that mentality of anything could work. You have to be open-minded and you have to be willing to learn.
So good.
That's awesome.
That's great insights. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sitting down with us today. This is awesome.
Yeah, great to meet
So
you.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Great to meet you. And we will see you in Banff in October.
Perfect.